Neil deGrasse Tyson and Elon Musk are doing is they believe those first parts of the logic statement that says, yes, we will make it to a post-human world. We will have the technology in place to do that. And if we have those two things, then we will be inclined to create what we've created right now. And if you don't believe that we will make it to a post-human state and that we won't have the technological advances that is needed to do the simulation, then of course, and it sounds like you're in that boat where if we make it to a post-human state and we don't have the technology to do so, which admittedly it takes a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount of computing power to achieve what is being theorized, then you can't believe that we would create a post-human us would create a simulation. But if you believe that we will make it to post-humanism and that the technological advances will enable us to create that simulation, then us as a society or those post-humans will be so inclined to create a world in which they can observe and watch. And maybe it's not the ancestry theory or the ancestor theory, and we can get into my theory in a second as to what it is. But if you believe those things that I said, the post-humanism and the technological advancements, then you have to almost believe that we live in a simulation. And I think those are what we are talking, and that's why Neil deGrasse Tyson gives it a 50-50 chance that we live in a simulation, right? He says that, yes, we could live in a simulation, but that's the very philosophical logic statement that we're dealing with now is, yes, it's possible, but we can't prove it. And if we can debate back and forth, I can postulate on all of the different things that you're going to, I can't prove from a physics perspective that we exist, but if you're going to create a simulation, wouldn't you set the physical laws in place that make sure that you can never prove that those occupants are in a simulation?
Depends on what the purpose of my simulation would be. So if I was going to create some simulation, there would be a specific reason I was trying to create the simulation, like what I was trying to prove, disprove, or understand.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So my theory, after all of my research and all of my genius, me watching...
That's questionable.
That was, I'll quote genius as well, but after
genius, air quotes,
all of my research, I believe that we, as our current state, if we go to 100 years from now and 1,000 years from now, and all of a sudden we have the technological ability to create a simulated world, as if we were living in this world now, I feel that we would create this world to test societies. I feel like we are a test environment where you would write code to, let's introduce global warming and see what happens. Let's introduce religion into this world to see what happens. So you have that knowledge for future societies. If there are numerous planets with beings on it or life that has any sort of sense to it, you would create a simulation to be able to advise those societies and say, look, we've run these simulations in a real world where nobody knows that they're in a simulation. And this is what happens if you introduce religion. This is what happens when you introduce all of these different things in. If you introduce global warming, if you introduce oceans or anything like that, they have the ability to write the code the way that they want to introduce scenarios that will educate them to make sure that future societies...
If you're doing that type of testing, you'd only change one variable at a time.
They've written the code already.
That's not what's happening.
You write the code.
They would be changing so many variables at any given time that you couldn't draw any conclusion or correlation to what caused the behavior.
You don't think that there's some post-human society that's sitting around their round table, their government, that says we are going to create a simulation to protect us and other societies and civilizations for the future. And this is what we think are the biggest things that would affect a society in the future, and we want to see how it affects that society.
I mean, I hope that we get to a point, I guess, that people have nothing better to do than sit around and do that. Because even if we had the technology to do that today, there's so many other problems that need to be dealt with. It's like that would be like a luxury problem to deal with.
But wouldn't we love that luxury to say, what happens if we allow North Korea to have nuclear missiles? What happens if we allow Hitler to... It's like a time machine, right? You have the ability to make those decisions based off of that simulation that you've already run. You can make more educated decisions. And it might not be an entire world, we might be able to simulate that small portion of that decision that we need to make. And then as technology grows, you're writing code, you're simulating that whole world, and you've already thought of a lot of different things that you want to test, and you need hundreds of thousands or millions of years to test that to see how it's going to affect future societies.
So what did we do to earn this code that we got in 2016 with the current president?
I don't think it's that. I think that's a facetious question. I don't think it's as easy. I don't think you can think of it as the micro scale like that. I think you have to, there's an end game to all of this. And I think in the future, computing is going to be so good and code is going to be so good that this artificial intelligence is going to be able to fill in the details. If you say, hey, I want to know how the world exists in 2050, and these are the variables that I want to have in that world. They may not have thought about Trump being president in 2016 or whatever else is happening, but the AI of that code is filling in those gaps to simulate real life to make sure that conclusion that you come to, however far it is down the line, is a true and accurate representation of that decision. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And
sure.
to go, no, don't pander. If you think about it from a mathematical standpoint, right, and conclude that physics is based around math, right?
Yeah, sure.
So there is another huge concept that is also based around math. Physics runs our entire physical world. Physics is the exact thing that this world is built off of. Mathematics is also a huge part, 90% or more part of coding, of computer software. So those two things, you created a world in which you coded completely. The physical laws of that world completely rely on physics, on mathematics. To me, that's a little bit more damning than just chemistry or things like that. I don't believe that there is I believe that there's a bigger correlation between physics and computer software or coding, writing code, that also lends towards the fact that there's more to play than just us being created off of evolution, off of this little amoeba.
This little amoeba. Okay.
This little amoeba.
So, I guess let me ask you, how did you come to believe this? Because this is it's pretty out there, man.
Well, it's out there.
So I mean, so you do IT work, right?
I do IT work. Yes, right. I am an analyst.
You're the boss, man.
I am a boss of a group of analysts. Yes,
but in some of your prior experience, you worked for the government.
Yeah,
you had like top secret clearance.
Okay, yeah,
is that true?
That is true. Yeah.
All right. So, are you? Did you bake any of your top secret clearance information into this theory that you have got?
No,
that you believe?
And it doesn't.
Is this what the government believes?
I
that
think
we're all a simulation?
No, I think that you can look. I wish I had enough clearance and I was part of those inner circles of those people that were talking about, do we live in a simulation? And I was not part of that world. I think and this is going to go pretty philosophical on you, but I don't think the government would even recognize that we are in a simulation either. So this is.
So you're just one of the only few enlightened.
No, I'm not.
Exist?
No, we're not. I'm not talking from. This is completely factual. I'm just saying, based off of the research that I've done, independently of any work that I've done, I feel that it is a valid explanation of the world that we live in. And just as much as Jesus creating or God creating everything, or us growing from this little cell into this giant creature that I am with 2 arms and 2 legs and a giant head, I think the simulation theory is just as viable and accurate as those things. There's no negation of that, right? You can't negate that. This theory is just as well as us.
So you're saying that just because you can't disprove something means that it's reality?
That's the whole point of a theory, right? Yeah, we can't.
No, you can't. That's not. No, that's
much.
Not how it
much
works.
of if you go talk to somebody, you're not a hugely religious guy, right?
Not at all.
I am not a hugely religious guy, and as much as your answer, not at all. But there are millions of people that believe that God created this world that we live in. God created people. God created everything that we have. is any more real about that than what I just told you over the last 30 minutes?
I mean, that's definitely a valid point, and I wouldn't say I agree with either viewpoint. I think it's certainly more plausible to me that life has evolved from this little amoeba, as you put it.
Yeah. Well,
evolution.
But let me go one step
evolution
further.
is not what's in the Bible.
But I also don't think that evolution and simulation theory can't coexist. I still think that the director, we're going to keep calling whoever is running this simulation that I believe in, the director. Nick Bostrom, the creator of this theory, basically uses that verbiage in his paper. So I'm going to look. Who am I to discount what he's using in his scientific paper?
Can you describe the director for me? I'd like to draw a picture of him.
I don't know. I don't. I haven't. Maybe next podcast we can post something as to what I think the director looks like.
What does the director look like? What do you guys think? Is it a woman?
Well, I would say in the current state of 2018, where sexuality and gender doesn't matter, I would say we can't put a label. We can't put a label on the director.
They're asexual.
I mean, we're talking. We don't know how long we're talking, but let's say that
Is the director an alien?
The director is a post-human. A part of a post-human civilization that is a iteration of where we are now.
So it's somebody, a 15-year-old, as you said earlier.
It could be because
has nothing better to do than create a program on their super computer.
Yeah, don't get caught up in it being a 15-year-old. All I'm saying is that it could be a 15-year-old because the computing power of that world, we can't even comprehend that computing power. And in essence, what I was saying, and I don't think that's not my original thought, that 15-year-old. I think Brian Greene or somebody mentioned that in one of the articles that I was reading. So I can't claim that as original thought. But in that world, the computing power could be in a 15-year-old's hands to be able to create this simulation. So anybody in that world, there's just so much computing power in post-human civilization that anybody could create this simulation is the point that I was trying to make.
So let's talk about another topic, I guess, that I want to see how your simulation theory fits into. So there's many people around the world that believe in something called reincarnation. Okay. Explain to me how reincarnation fits in your simulation theory. So
I don't think reincarnation fits inside of the. So I think let me reset. I think there's two viable explanations. One is which reincarnation doesn't exist. I think that is a fallacy of that religion. And again, if you're going off of my theory as to why somebody would want to create a simulation, it is that religious portion just created. They're not worried about the details of religion. They're seeing this director or this post-human civilization is wondering what religion does to the occupants of that world. So I don't think that necessarily the post-human civilization or that will continue to use the 15-year-old in his garage or her garage. It's probably a 15-year-old boy. I don't think they don't have anything better to do. But I don't think that is programmed into the code. I think that's part of the artificial intelligence. It just fills in the details of that necessary religion. The religion is the observable.
You don't think that each of us, you and I, are individual pieces of code that are recycled in these various simulations? Because you're postulating.
Well, that's the second portion of that, right?
There are multiple simulations occurring at the same time.
There could be there could be infinite numbers of simulations running at the same time because of that computing power.
So you don't think that reincarnation could be real and we could each be unique pieces of code and they inject us in the various simulations and that's your code recalling some of those different worlds? You
mentioned that I work in IT. And if you look at, not that I'm I'm a big dumb idiot for the most part. I've done some research that lets me postulate on this topic, but I'm not going to pretend to be a coder. But what I've noticed from most code, and I think a lot of people would back this up, and please feel free to call me an idiot.
You're an idiot.
Not you, the people that are listening, but thank you. A lot of code is recycled. So one website could have very similar code with a few changes and it be a pretty substantial change. So to say that if we were all coded from a common sort of code base and tweaked a little bit to get each individualism and things like that and consciousness and everything else, then it would be in the realm of possibility that quote unquote reincarnation exists, because we are as we die, that gets recycled, that